Welcome back to the Postpartum Plan podcast. This podcast is designed to support and empower you through postpartum. Whether you're expecting, in the early postpartum days, or beyond, this space is for you. I'm your host, Madison Fugere, a dedicated postpartum doula and pediatric sleep consultant, striving to help parents feel confident and supported in their parenting journey. Each week, I'm sharing practical tips and expert advice to help you navigate all the postpartum things with confidence. Well, as much confidence as you can. Let's embark on this journey together, making your parenthood as serene and supportive as possible. On today's episode, I'm joined by Kathryn Lopez, who's a licensed family and marriage therapist, as well as a life coach who specializes in perinatal mental health and sex and intimacy therapy. She helps individuals and couples navigate the emotional and the relational shifts of parenthood from conception and pregnancy to birth, postpartum, and beyond. Kathryn creates a safe space for clients to explore their evolving identities, relationships, and self-care. She offers online therapy for folks in California as well as Florida and provides life coaching worldwide. So check out her information below and let's get into it. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kathryn. I'm excited to have you.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much, Madison.
Absolutely. I know before this, we were just kind of trying to decide exactly where we were going to take this conversation because it can go so many different directions. But I'm super excited to kind of chat more in depth about this whole identity crisis that a lot of people have after having a baby. And I think it's something that I hear about from clients and just from people as a whole all the time, right? Like even scrolling social media, because obviously a lot of the people I'm seeing are new parents on my feed. I'm seeing a lot of this, who am I? And I hear a lot of that from clients too. So I'm excited to kind of get some of your professional opinion on what this can look like and how we can help people to kind of get through this new identity that they're kind of evolving, right? So yeah, thank you for joining me and being so willing to share some of your knowledge with everybody. Before we dive into it though, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got into the work and do what you do?
Sure. Well, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California and Florida, and I'm also a life coach. So I'm able to do the life coaching worldwide, which is really exciting to be able
Awesome.
to work with people also from, different backgrounds and in different time zones. It's
Right.
wonderful. And so I specialize in perinatal mental health and then sex and intimacy therapy. So I work with both individuals and couples around these topics. A large part of it is the transition between pregnancy going into birth or birth going into postpartum and then postpartum and beyond, right?
Yeah.
There's so many transitions that happen. And, on this topic of today, the identity shift specifically that happens for moms is something that is often not talked about.
Right.
And the term for that is called matrescence, which is similar to adolescence. So before I dive too much into that, I got into this specialty shortly after I became pregnant with my first son. I really realized how little support, especially in the mental health field, there was for mamas and expecting parents. And it struck me as something I needed to offer and provide and create space for other people, and just took a deep dive into it. And here I am several years later.
Oh
So I'm
my
so happy to be
gosh.
here.
I love that. That's awesome. And I do think like a lot of the people that are in the like life coaching and therapy kind of like space and worlds, especially those who work with, perinatal professionals, really I find come to that with some sort of personal experience, which I
Yeah.
think in some ways can be like really helpful when you're talking about things that you've experienced, right? And that's all
Mhm.
coming from a doula over here who has no children. So like not to say that people who don't have experience of it can't do it, right? But I think that it really kind of makes you emotionally connected in a different way, which I think is super cool. So that's awesome that you're able to kind of provide that support to people. And I love that you have the life coaching side of it too, because it's not just about, getting therapy and support in that way, but it
Yeah.
really is about kind of working through, of course, I just kicked the table and vibrated the entire thing. Sorry, everybody, if you hear that. Sorry, but yes, it's really about kind of figuring out how to get through these life changes, right? And just kind of
Mhm.
like talking to somebody to validate that, like, yeah, what you're feeling is like a thing that happens, especially in parenthood, right? I know that so many people come into parenthood, they're themselves, they're a partner, they're this, they're that, but then you now become a parent, you become a mom, you become somebody who has to put somebody else before yourself at all times because they don't have the ability to take care of themselves. And I find that for a lot of people, it's really hard to balance all of those roles now, once they bring in their kiddo to the world.
Yes, it's so hard to balance it, especially in in the Western culture. It's a more of a individualistic
Right.
society, right? And then there's a lot of the social media influence of do it on your own and super mom kind of ideas that
Yeah.
I think are actually pretty detrimental for a lot of mamas out there, having this unrealistic expectation of doing it all. So that's something I like to unpack and demystify with my clients and really look at, what is that balance for them? Because it's different for everyone, right?
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of different right ways to do all these different things in parenthood and figuring that out. But one component that term matrescence, I just wanted to return back to
Yeah.
that because that is the root of the identity shift that mothers go through. And this is every single time that they have a child. So they can go through the identity shift of matrescence with, baby number one, two, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a forever evolving thing as you have children.
Hmm.
Um, I like how some cultures, when they refer to the time where there is a birth, it's less about a child is born and more about a mother is born,
Right.
right? And the emphasis being on that. There are something I bring into my kind of life coaching and therapy arena is a lot of psychoeducation around the neuro changes and
Mm.
neurodevelopment that's happening.
Yeah.
So within matrescence, there, just like adolescence, there's enormous hormonal, physical, neurological, emotional, some would argue spiritual shifts that are happening, right? And it can often take a lot of people by surprise, that feeling of, I don't feel like myself and what's
Right.
going on, right? I know I'm sleep deprived and there's all these pieces going on, but it can sometimes hit you so hard and often does, the shift into motherhood. So that is a very common thing
Hmm.
that it just takes a lot of people by surprise. And it
Yeah.
can be really helpful to talk with other people, whether it's a therapist or a mom's group or, your partner and friends and family about that is really normal. And a new version of you is being born while the old version of you is leaving. And in a way, like passing away, which is kind of morbid sounding, but it is forever changing and growing and adapting your life.
Yeah.
So,
I love that you said it in that way because I do find, so during my doula training, we talked a
mhm.
lot about the emotional side of parenthood and how as doulas we can help parents kind of work through the different emotions that they may experience. And one of those things that we talked about was grief and
Yeah.
understanding that like grief is a lot more than we realize and that we
Mhm.
acknowledge and that grief doesn't need to be some sort of horrible thing that happens, right? And a lot of
Mhm.
the time, you have two opposite emotions happening at the same time. And so a
Mhm.
lot of the time with these families that I'm supporting and that I'm sure that you are seeing as well, a lot of the time grief is paired with this joyous moment of bringing a child into the world. And you have this amazing feeling of like, oh my gosh, this is my baby and this is what I've been dreaming of for the last 9 months or maybe even longer, right? But simultaneously are grieving this realization, I guess you could say, that yeah, you are becoming a different type of person, whether it be for good or bad, right? Like that's why
Mhm.
we're saying like it is positive, but it is also an opportunity to have some sort of grief over,
Yeah.
the what I once did or who I once was, right? And I think that for a lot of people and in society, we're not used to having those two opposing feelings at the same
Yes.
time, right?
Hmm.
And I think people then not only feel like they're grieving who they once were, but now they feel resentful sometimes of themselves or
Yeah.
of their babies, or if they're the first person in their friend group to have babies, they're resentful of friends, right? And there's so many
Hmm.
different pieces to it that I think kind of like puzzle together, and people on top of that, of all of it, are not talking about because they think they're the only one feeling it. And
Exactly.
so it gets so challenging. So I love that you mentioned that aspect of it because it's something that I talk about with families a lot, right? About those complex feelings of opposition all at the same time.
Right. It's like the paradoxical nature of being a parent,
Yeah.
right? You're holding both and almost all the
Yes.
time, whether it's who I used to be, and at times you miss that so much, as you're up at 3 in the morning and, with your baby, but you wouldn't want anything else but this. And, it's that paradoxical nature that it's so vivid in parenthood and motherhood, especially in those early days as you're just adjusting to
Right.
this new way of life. I mean, you blink your eyes and it's different, And then with the grief piece, yeah, as a culture, I don't think we really have many examples of how to, work through. And through is the term I use because grief, there has to be a working through process. There's not many examples or, advocacy of taking time and to work through the grief, and that is a healthy process that us as human beings have to, move on and to digest and to let that be and have peace in what is to come.
Right. Right. I think in that part of going through it, and I think the huge part of acknowledging that things are changing is a big part of that identity shift, because I do think a lot of people that ignore it and think, oh, my life's going to be the same, or just ignore that they're feeling, you know, a little bit resentful or are feeling a little bit
Mhm.
jealous of their friends who are still going on vacations or whatever it may be. Or thinking, oh, my friend's up at 2 a.m. at the bar and I'm up at 2 a.m. feeding my baby, right? I think that
Exactly.
all of those things become, if you're not acknowledging them, they become just kind of stagnant in the back. And then eventually you're
Hmm.
just really like, okay, well, what am I doing? I'm a walking zombie. I'm just,
Hmm.
and it also goes to the other thing I tell a lot of my clients: when you have teeny tiny babies, they can't do a single thing for themselves, right?
Yeah.
So, like, they are quite literally relying on you for life.
Hmm.
And so you have to put them first, and slowly
Hmm.
you get a little bit more. But I jokingly, but also like kind of seriously say that it is kind of like an unhealthy relationship, because all babies do is take and take and take, and you're not even getting a smile out of them at the beginning, right?
Right.
You just get them pooping on you and falling asleep on you,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But eventually you get that smile, or you get that coo or that giggle, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it's so hard in those early stages because now you have no identity of who you are because you're truly living for this baby. And it
Hmm.
can be really, really challenging for people to know like where in the world there's what space do they take up and where do they belong, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's that whole new birth of yourself, right? And
Yeah.
I think as time goes on, I often like to think of in postpartum, I break up postpartum as if it were trimesters, just like pregnancy, right? There's all this emphasis and talk on pregnancy and birth, and then boom, radio silence with
Right.
postpartum often, right? And
Right.
so I found it useful to think about postpartum in the trimester realm or kind of framework as well. We have the idea of the fourth trimester. So what about fourth, fifth, and sixth? Because our sense of self as it is, new and being born grows and we become more clear about that through those
Right.
postpartum trimesters. Our hormones start to, balance out again, becomes
Hmm.
more familiar again. all these pieces start to find alignment again as we go through the trimesters, similar to in pregnancy. It's just
Right.
on the, the mirror image of that.
Yeah, right. If we're taking 3 months to, or 3 months, three trimesters to kind of, build this, why are
Yeah.
we just all of a sudden just assuming things are going to be different? Absolutely. I love that kind of idea of like, if it's taking 3 trimesters to get there, give it the three
Hmm.
trimesters to come out of it, right? Absolutely. Now, when you're working with families, or I guess it really just comes to, I think more specifically, I guess today we can kind of focus on mothers.
Hmm.
Um, we this whole postpartum thing happens, right? And then I feel like parents don't know where to go from there. So like I find a lot of moms then, like we just said, they don't have that identity. They don't know where
Hmm.
they fit in. Do you have some like more tangible-ish steps that people listening might be able to like think about, resonate with, or like even act upon in order to feel a little bit more solid in their own identity, that their kind of newfound identity of who they are?
Yes, that's a great question. I think always coming to it with sensitivity and kind of a non-judgmental place, right?
Yeah,
Being very, if anything, more soft and kind and gentle with yourself as if you would be to your baby,
right.
that kind of piece. You have a new baby and you are a new baby version of yourself.
Hmm.
So, that just sweet softness, right, is really important because we're very open and vulnerable and raw in, closer to birth, right? So that is one thing. I give all mamas who are listening to this the permission to be, soft with yourself, to be forgiving of yourself, I think is so important. Another thing is to check your expectations, right? Whether it's talking to a partner or family or friends, think about your expectations of what this time was like and how those are different, and practice being flexible with those. And that might change, right? We know with the little ones that you have a groove for 1 week or 1 day or 1 month, and
Hmm.
then it just changes,
Totally changes.
right?
Yeah.
And so being flexible with your expectations of yourself and what you're able to do, or maybe what your needs are, those might change.
Hmm.
And with that being said, be mindful of your needs. I feel like, baby is solely dependent on you, is needing everything from you. But I'm a big proponent of, if you're going to provide and be there for baby, you have to be taken care of first, which is
Absolutely.
a bit, kind of, whoa, wait a sec. But it's so important that you have some of your basic needs met, right? Sleep, nutrition, support, right? Those three pillars are critical for having a smoother time through all of this and being able to see and navigate more clearly. So another piece would be receive as much support as you can handle. I know
Right.
sometimes it's hard to, say yes to stuff or receive support, but I always encourage mamas, like, as much as you can just handle, receive. It is the time to
Absolutely.
receive because you are giving so much. You are doing
Well, and I
so
think
much.
people are so afraid to tell people that they like after you give birth, I think so many people are like, "Hey, what can I do?" And
Yes.
so many times the answer is, "Oh, nothing, we're good," right? Because you're
Yeah.
so afraid to say something, but I think remembering that like people are asking because they want to help, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so having some sort of list or option of things to give people, whether it be like something specific that you need and you give them
Mhm.
one thing, or I have a lot of my clients make like lists prenatally of support that could be
Fabulous.
helpful to them. Because then you could say like, oh, here's a list of a bunch of stuff that might be helpful. Is there something on here that you would be comfortable doing, right? Because
Mhm.
there's some people that will come over that you don't want to ask to scrub your bathroom, but there may be a
Right.
friend that you know doesn't do well with babies and would scrub your bathroom.
Yes.
So, having kind of a place for every person, I think is really important. And having options for people and being able to help you is also super helpful. You know,
Mhm.
some people might want to cook you a meal and some people might not want to do that and they might want to hire you a dog walker. So, like,
Yeah.
everyone has their place and people want to help. And I think that remembering that, like, that's okay to get that help. And that I think it
Mhm.
goes back to what you were saying, like, it isn't this whole you need to be a super mom, super parent thing.
Mhm.
Like, everything is not just relying on you, although it may feel like it is.
Hmm.
You have support systems likely in place or people that want to help. Um, and if you don't, reach out to your local community because people will want to help you, right? Um, and
Exactly.
so I think that that's also so important to kind of reach out to and remember in that process as
Hmm.
well, like you were just mentioning.
Yeah, it requires being proactive though, right? In our
Oh, yeah.
culture where it's not just kind of a part of how we are postpartum
Hmm.
as a community, it does require that proactive piece, right? So whether that's, preventatively making that list because it's hard to sometimes, decision fatigue. It's hard to know what do I
Oh,
need? I
yeah.
don't know, right? So doing that, I think is fabulous. That's a
Oh
really
yeah.
great idea.
I tell a lot of people too that like if you're listening and you may not be in like the early postpartum days, but you have a friend who might be, like
Hmm.
rather than just saying what can I do, like maybe coming up with two or three things that you can do and just texting and being like, "Hey, I am around on Tuesday morning and I'm all yours. Do you want me to go grocery shopping for you? Do you want me to come walk the dog or I'll scrub your bathroom?" And like letting them pick an option. Or I've
Yeah.
even seen somebody say like on social media before one mom was saying like, I have my own kids and I really don't have a lot of time to give, but I'm already making a Target run. So let me like text my mom friend and say, "Hey, I'm going to Target. I know I'm sure you need toilet paper. What else do you need?" And just
Yeah.
picking stuff up and dropping it off at the door for them, right? Because even with that minimal amount of time, something that you're doing can probably help out like those people. So I
Hmm.
used to say too, like it sometimes can be really helpful, especially if you know your type of friend, right? If your type
Yes.
of friend is someone that you know is just going to be overwhelmed and not answer their phone,
Hmm.
just go with what you know they're going to need.
Yes. Oh, that's
Um,
so smart. Yeah, what a great
so
idea.
yeah, I love that. Okay, so now kind of trying to find this new identity can be challenging in knowing when to balance things, right, is what we were just kind of saying. You have to
Yeah.
try to put yourself first, give yourself some time, but while also still supporting the people and the baby around you.
Hmm.
Um, are there things that you will suggest to a lot of people to try to help themselves find a balance between their old and this new identity? I know that sometimes that like self-care idea plays a
Hmm.
lot into postpartum. But I was interested to see if you had any specific suggestions that might help people to kind of melt together their two,
Yeah.
identities and to create their new sense of self. Hey guys, it's Madison. Yeah, I'm here interrupting myself, but I wanted to take a minute to talk about something that can feel so overwhelming as a parent, sleep. So, if you are in the thick of the sleepless nights, struggling to figure out how to get your baby and yourself to get more rest, then I want you to know that you're not alone. Here's the thing, if what you're doing is working for you, great, keep doing it. But if it's not, there are resources to help, and I'm happy to be one of them. As a certified pediatric sleep consultant, I work with families to create personalized sleep plans that actually make sense for your current and unique situation. No cookie cutter advice, just practical strategies that match your parenting style and your child's personality. Because let's be real, sleep is not a luxury, it is a necessity. So, if you're ready to make a change, I'd love to help. You can book a free sleep connection call on my website, www.serenemomentsdoula.com, or reach out to me on Instagram at serenemoments.doula.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it depends on where you are, kind of what postpartum trimester in a sense you're in.
Right.
The first one or the fourth trimester, would be more simple things like it's harder to be away from baby if you're nursing, for example. It's harder to have longer periods of time away. So kind of focusing on those small little things, right?
Yeah.
So for example, if you're nursing, you can really, I encourage clients to tune into that oxytocin hit, right? That happens with your letdown and just really soaking into looking at your baby and enjoying those moments as best as possible instead of being on your phone and being distracted or talking to someone else. Like making the most out of what is happening right there
Yeah.
can be really helpful. Or I'm a big proponent in going outside and being in nature. Maybe that's taking your shoes off and walking in the grass. I know it sounds kind of
Yeah.
funny, but these small things make a big difference, right? And in the
Absolutely.
beginning, it is more small things. And
Right.
then as, time goes on, thinking about what gives you joy, right? Maybe if before baby you enjoyed dance Is there something, can you go to some kind of fun movement class or some fun dance thing in a park with baby, or can someone watch your baby right there while you do that, right?
Right.
Asking for that support and
Yeah.
still engaging in things that bring you joy and that
Hmm.
has a thread of familiarity from your life before.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that a really big thing that comes with this identity is, right, a lot of people nowadays, and I can so relate to this, so that if this is you, you are not alone. A lot of people have a big chunk of their identity is what they do for work, right?
Yeah.
Because I think in the society we live in, work is such a huge chunk of your time and your life.
Yeah.
And people are proud and confident of the things that they can accomplish when it comes to like careers, which is great.
Hmm.
But I do think that especially for people when they are type A, work driven, love their job type of
Yeah.
people, it's even more challenging to then find this sense of self when they're on, parental leave. Now you have a
Hmm.
baby, so you're doing these new things. Life looks very, very different, right? And it's
Hmm.
hard to kind of navigate, okay, well, like I know this isn't my new normal yet, right? But this is like a phase of this new
Yeah.
normal. And trying to kind of settle into those different things, I think is really challenging for some people.
Hmm.
I know especially for a lot of like I can imagine a couple of my very like corporate America dads of the postpartum
Yeah.
world that I support. And one of them, he barely got like 2 weeks off, and even being home, he was like, I don't know what to do. He's like, this is
Hmm.
weird. I know I have two kids under 13 months, but this is weird. And so for some
Yeah.
people, it's like very different for them to try to get into a rhythm.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that I would love to know kind of different ways that people might be able to kind of mentally rationalize. I don't know if that's a good way to
Hmm.
put it, but with these new phases, because obviously, like you said, babies are constantly changing. This
Hmm.
identity that you're now having is going to be ever changing. So,
Hmm.
as society, we're horrible with change, I feel like. So, is there a way that people can kind of help themselves to cope with and move through these ever-changing kind of like lifestyle and identity?
Yeah, I liked how you said, these phases, right? These seasons in a
Yeah,
sense. And with that being said, around the topic of expectations, I'd encourage people listening to this to expect it's going to be different. When you
right.
return back to work, it's gonna probably feel different. That's at least, 9 times out of 10 what my clients talk about.
Right.
I think it can be very helpful to find people that are going through similar things as you, whether that's joining a mama group or I know there's
Yeah.
that Peanut app, right?
Yeah.
Finding like mom best friends and finding people that are going through it too, that are trying to adjust with getting back to work and, you know, feeling different at work, but, then doing their job and everyone's the same there, right?
Yeah.
So not being so alone in that. I think isolation is one of the big, daunting things about
Yeah.
motherhood. So doing whatever you can to kind of break through that isolation. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that a lot of people, and I have a lot of clients that experience this, and so I've actually gone to some of these groups with them, is the first time going is so overwhelming for so many people, especially with first time parents, right? Or people that are more introverted. It's
Hmm.
challenging to like put yourself out there. And so I find even at my own, like when I teach baby dance club or do groups,
Hmm.
I'm saying to a lot of people, my big thing, you got out of the house, that's great, right?
It's
Or like
huge. Yeah.
try to talk to one more person that you haven't talked to before, and it takes a couple times to find somebody that maybe you might
Mhm.
be a good parent friend match to. But I
Yeah.
think that remembering that most of the time when you're going to these events, you're getting people who are in a very similar season of life to you,
Hmm.
and they're probably feeling just as anxious to get out the house as you are, right? So I think of this example when I was teaching baby dance club. I had three people signed up and I was like, oh, I don't know if I should run it. We should normally run it with four. But it's like, you know what? I'm right around the corner. We'll run it. So I went to this class, and two of these moms were had met at a previous class, and so they were actually going to get coffee together. They kind of knew each other a little bit after class. And the third one who came, she didn't know them, but they were saying to her, they were like, "Hey, we're gonna go get coffee after class. Do you want to come with us?" And she was like, "Sure."
Mhm.
So it was so cute because they got to make these friends. And so, you're super excited. Everyone's going. And then right before they left, one of them got a phone call and she answered it and she started laughing. And she's like, "Yeah, yeah, I gotta go. I'm gonna go hang out with these other moms." And she's like, "Yeah, mom, I'm making friends." Right? And she hung up the
Yeah.
phone. She told us, she's like, "Yeah, my mom's been telling me that I need to make friends. So she and my husband are both so happy that I came and that now I'm
Yeah.
going to get coffee with these other people and I'm making friends."
Oh.
And so I think that everybody feels the same way because the other two women then said, "Oh,
Mhm.
yep, had the same conversation with my husband this morning," right?
Yes.
And so I think remembering that, like, more than times than not, the people that you're going to meet at these groups are probably in the same kind of space as you of being like, "I need to get out of the house. I don't know where to go. My family really wants me to, explore
Mhm.
and to feel confident going out. Everyone else is probably nervous their baby's going to cry too." So, like, I think remembering that, like, everyone is probably in the same boat as you is so important when going to these types of groups, right?
Exactly. And too, that, our brains, we're probably all pretty sleep deprived. Our
Mm-hmm.
minds are feeling very different, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
I remember going to some of these mom groups and thinking, what I can't even hold a conversation. How am I gonna socialize, right?
Right.
But it felt really nice to just kind of
Oh,
sit
yeah.
and be with our babies and share space,
Well,
right? And
and your
just be.
brain turns on in a different way too,
Yeah.
right? Like there's this section of your brain that hasn't been probably used in a while because it's that like adult conversation, meeting
Mhm.
people kind of need the socialization that like I've had so many people also say like, "Yeah, it's great to go out and just have an adult conversation and not be talking in a baby voice or
Yeah.
not to just be talking about, how my baby's hungry and they had a blowout and we're gonna take a
Yes.
bath later, right? Like talking
Right.
about something that isn't like baby specific can be like
Mhm.
so enthusing and you wouldn't even realize.
Yeah, so
So,
refreshing and so important, to not be alone, to be with other people who are just going through it too. And you can get pretty incredible tips and tricks, right?
yeah,
On
yeah.
navigating this stuff
And
that how else are you
right.
supposed to know?
Right. And normally, once you go to one of those groups in the area, you'll often find somebody who has gone to a bunch of them and will give you suggestions on places to go and
Yeah.
things to do. Right. So I say, like, even if it's not the our initial event that you go to isn't like your jam, right? Like, say it's a
Mhm.
mommy and me yoga or, say it's just like a tummy time class, whatever it may be. Even if it's not your vibe, it's also great to just get to know the community and, crowdsource at that point to figure out where to
Yeah.
go. Um, because you never know who you're going to meet. And I think that the big point to that, like you were saying, is yeah, surrounding yourself by people that are in a similar space as you can really help you to feel more confident in the new
Mhm.
you. Absolutely.
And validating of all the ups and downs and the
Oh, yeah.
paradoxical nature, right? All of those pieces that you're not alone with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think just remembering that, like, there is so much to it. And like we mentioned a few times, but I think it's like, again, so important to say again that it is like a phase. And so there are going to be
Yeah.
constant changing pieces. And so, like giving yourself grace to like understand that things are going to
Mhm.
be ever changing.
Mhm.
And that you're going to like figure out what works and what doesn't for your life is so, so okay. And we said that, yeah, like you said, the paradox of like multiple emotions at once and
Mhm.
navigating feeling all these things at the same time is so, so overwhelming, but also like so normal.
Yeah, and it's a really I often bring attention to it's a beautiful opportunity to work on, I don't know, I find having a baby, there's almost this mirror that goes up that kind of forces you to reflect on what's not working in your
Hmm.
life and what
Oh
is,
yeah.
and really addressing the things that aren't, and then shifting and changing and working through those, right? And there's that
Hmm.
tension around those pieces and the opportunity to lean in.
Hmm.
So
I
let's make it
so
better for the
hear,
next generation. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hear people constantly saying that having a baby makes you relive the trauma that you didn't realize you were pushing down for sure. And like the
Yeah.
things that you have ignored in your life or have definitely like just handled differently, right? And it really does kind of make you reflect a lot. And so I think sometimes that plays a big part in the identity aspect too. Like you said, it's really
Hmm.
like a little mini mirror for sure.
Hmm.
Um, So I think kind of identifying and then knowing when to seek out support that might be
Yeah.
helpful as well. There's so much to it. There's so much to it. But I think yeah, giving yourself grace is the cornerstones of it all, right? Just letting yourself
Yeah.
feel what you feel and figure out where to go from there.
Right. And when in doubt, seek support, ask for help, receive the help. Yeah.
I love that. I love that so
Mm.
much. Well, we won't want to overwhelm you guys. So definitely take what you can from that and then loop back, check out the show notes below, see if, meeting up with Kathryn might be something that can be helpful to you. If you're looking for some support, reach out to either of us. Happy to kind of connect you in a place that might work best for you. But yes, thank you for joining me. Thank you for tackling this topic that I think so many people can relate to, and sharing some of your knowledge with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Postpartum Plan podcast. I hope that today's episode brought you support, relatability, and valuable insight. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review and share with any of your prenatal and postpartum friends and family. Your feedback helps us reach more parents seeking support. And if you're looking for additional resources, please feel free to connect via Instagram at Serene Moments Doula for constant information, tips, and tricks, or check out my website, www.serenemomentsdoula.com. See you next week.